what the joy of movies really was.
I mean, he started writing in '67. He won his Pulitzer in, what, '75. Hasn't been on TV in a half dozen years, but here's a guy who's got more than 800,000 followers on Twitter. How did he transcend these generations?
Well, it's an amazing thing. When he first started on TV, remember, you know, he wasn't universally loved. He and Gene Siskel were a lot of people tuned in just to see them bicker, because, you know, it was said that they kind of didn't like each other off camera, and people referred to them derisively as, you know, the fat guy and the other one. But slowly, as people grew up with Roger, as new fans came of age, he, in part also because of his Pulitzer, managed to acquire a lot of authority and to make film criticism serious on television, which it really hadn't been at that point. Then, what was absolutely stunning was that, you know, his greatest gift was his voice, his ability to speak extemporaneously. When he lost that, he went and he reinvented himself. He turned himself into this amazing blogger, you know, more passionate than ever, someone whose voice was infectious, and who every day set an example for all of us in what to do when, you know, when life gives you a lemon. I think he wrote 1,000 times better after he lost his voice than he did before. In some ways, I mean, as terrible as a curse it was a blessing for him as a writer and a thinker, that he could lay out his philosophy of life, his aesthetic and his politics in a way that he never had before.
So what is it about that show that made it so successful? The two of them co-hosted together for almost, what, 23, 24 years?
Well, a lot of critics went on TV and talked and were not really challenged by anybody, but they were very, very different people. You know, you had Siskel, who was very prickly and scattershot, and really, really kind of moody and not that much of an intellectual. And Roger, who was, you know, who managed to be very, very centered and to kind of keep the discussion on track. And, you know, they taught us not just how to think about movies, which I think we knew how to do, but how to talk about them, so that, you know, we didn't just sit there and say, well, I liked it too, you know, let's give it a yes. You know, they actually engaged with each other. They fought. They aired different worldviews, different personalities, different temperaments. And I think they created a template for a lot of shows that followed, none of them anywhere near as good as the original Siskel and Ebert at the movies.
Did getting a thumbs up or a thumbs down actually have a measurable difference on a movie?
Oh, sure it did. I mean, look, the phrase 2 thumbs up has passed into the lexicon. There are people still nowadays who say, I give it 2 thumbs up, even if it's their own thumbs. Yes, you know, it was, you know, Roger often lamented that, you know, quote ads were all reduced to silly superlatives and adjectives. And I once reminded him, to his great irritation, that, you know, as much as he wanted to see more intelligent quote ads, a lot of it these days was, you know, 2 big thumbs. On the other hand, you know, if you could win over Ebert and Siskel, you knew that there was going to be an audience. Ebert, you see, Ebert didn't think just about his own responses, you know, and he didn't think about the history of cinema. I mean, he did, but first and foremost, he thought about you, the viewer at home. You know, what are you going to make of this? What is everyone going to make? What can we learn from this? How can we support this filmmaker or that filmmaker? It's really an inspiring legacy.
I mean, it seems even Facebook stole the thumbs up for the like button, right? I want to ask...
He copyrighted it, though. He did copyright it.
Did he really?
Yes, he did. Oh, yeah.
So I want to ask, what are you going to remember about him as a peer? Because I'm sure there's hundreds of movies that the two of you disagreed on, but when you read his work and compared it to your own, what's going to leap out at you?
Well, I think the funny thing is, you know, Roger never really represented a certain aesthetic. He wasn't, you know, his writing wasn't transformative the way someone like Andrew Sarris or Pauline Kael was, people that, you know, whose aesthetic we still argue about. As I said, what I remember about Roger was that public persona, that public dimension. He reminded us that movies weren't just some private thing that we sat in the dark and were sort of bathed in the light of the screen. That they were, that you know, each and every one of us, our own responses, you know, were a starting point for a larger debate, a larger cultural debate. What does this mean? What is this artist trying to do? How can, how can movies transform all of our lives, teach us, what it is to transcend, our mundane reality? That's what inspires me most about his legacy. Not just even so much any individual things he wrote, although he was a fine writer, he was a lucid writer. It was the, it was that public dimension to what he did that is hugely important.
All right, David Edelstein, thanks so much for your time.
Again, the major developments of the day. North Korea moved a missile to its east coast as the latest in a series of escalating threats. And the governor of Connecticut signed some of the toughest gun control measures in the nation into law.
Online, the latest in a series of debates over spending versus saving. Today's argument, how modern economists get it wrong. That's on Making Sense. Today marks the 45th anniversary of the death of Martin Luther King, Jr. We have a tribute from a class of Washington, D.C. fourth graders. Watch that on our homepage. All that and more is on our website, newshour.pbs.org. And that's the Newshour for tonight. I'm Jeffrey Brown.
And I'm Judy Woodruff. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening with Mark Shields and David Brooks, among others. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by...
More than 2 years ago, the people of BP made a commitment to the Gulf, and every day since, we've worked hard to keep it. Today, the beaches and Gulf are open for everyone to enjoy. We've shared what we've learned so we can all produce energy more safely. BP's also committed to America. We support nearly 250,000 jobs and invest more here than anywhere else. We're working to fuel America for generations to come. Our commitment has never been stronger.
BNSF Railway.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems at home and around the world.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
It's busted open, and I thought I'm just going to leave it there because somebody may come back for it. So if you're trying to turn yours off and you can't find it in your pocket, it's outside.
Okay.
Oh, and there's a Porsche Carrera outside with their lights on, I think.
Oh, parked down there
by the museum, next to the museum.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item 2, then oral communications. What?
Pledge.
Oh, the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just get so excited when I'm up here, I skip things.
That's right.
We'll keep you in line.
Okay. That brings us to item 2A, then, additions and deletions to the agenda. Danielle, is there any?
None.
None? Okay. Public comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak to any item that's not on the agenda? Anything that sticks in your craw or you've got a little bug about? Now's the time. Nope. Okay. Commission comments. Linda, you have something.
I do. I just have one. On Saturday, April 13th, the Capitola Museum will be opening again with its new exhibit, which is Picture This, Capitola by the Sea. It's a great exhibit, and we'll be opening with a reception at 11 o'clock hosted by the museum board, and then open for the rest of the year starting at 12 o'clock. So we hope that everybody can come out and check out the new exhibit. Carolyn's done a really wonderful job with a lot of photographs that you've never seen before.
Okay, great. Thank you, Linda. Anything else from any commissioner? None? Okay. Any staff comments?
No.
None? Okay, that brings us to item 3A, then, the approval of the minutes from the March 7th, 2013 meeting. Any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chairman, I made a correction with the clerk with regards to a verb that was present tense, and we made it pass because I'm no longer sitting on the sanitation board.
Okay. Any other corrections or additions?
I'll move the minutes.
Approval of the minutes.
Second.
Motion to second then with that correction noted. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And that brings us to item 4 on the consent calendar. These are items that are considered by the Planning Commission to be routine and will be enacted in one motion in the form listed below. No separate discussion on these items unless a Planning Commissioner wants to pull it off for discussion or a member of the public would like to discuss something about that item on the agenda. So there's one item on the consent calendar. It would be 105 Stockton Avenue, a conditional use permit and sign permit to allow a deli sandwich shop in an existing building in the CV Central Village zoning district. Danielle, any comments on this at all?
It is a shop and not a ship that's
Yeah, I saw that.
being proposed.
Any comments? None. Is there a motion?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second then to approve the consent calendar for 105 Stockton Avenue use permit. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to item 5, which is public hearings. These are intended to provide an opportunity for the public to discuss these items. The procedure is as follows. The staff will make a presentation. There will be a public discussion if anybody chooses to speak. The Planning Commission comments.
Chairperson Graves, before the two folks leave that are walking out the door, we should really welcome you to Capitola and tell you we're looking. Well, I probably do, but I can't see you. Anyway, welcome. We've needed a deli in the village for years, and so good on you.
I used to run Hill up the street.
All right, good.
Those years.
Lots of experience.
Yes.
All right, we love it.
Good job.
And historical note,
Break a leg.
I had the very first deli down there back in 1972.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Should have kept it.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be.
Good luck.
Good luck,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you for letting me do that.
Okay, so staff presentation, public discussion, Planning Commission comments. We'll close the public portion of the hearing, and then we'll have Planning Commission discussion and a decision. So the first item is 116 Grand Avenue. This is a coastal permit, design permit, and revocable encroachment permit to remodel an existing single-story family home and construct a new detached garage with a setback variance and a tree removal permit in the R1 zone. Danielle?
Well, let's see. I'm not starting out well. Okay. It was working.
We have
so
plans.
we'll forgo the PowerPoint, if you don't mind. And this is a proposal for a remodel and a brand new 2-car garage at the 116 Grand Avenue. The proposed remodel, the site is a non-conforming but legal with side yard and front yard setbacks. And the proposed interior remodel is to convert an existing one-car garage to a bedroom and a small addition with a utility room and bathroom towards the back, which does meet current setbacks. The garage is located at the rear of the site. It's a two-car, single-story garage. It does require a variance to the backup area or the driveway area off of Central. And staff is supportive of the variance as this lot is unusually configured, and there is really no other site within the Depot Hill area that would have this situation, and therefore doesn't require a special privilege for that variance. The remodel of the home and the garage will use the same materials, windows, roof materials of the existing home. And it was pointed out to me that this is a historic structure and that the garage doors do keep in with the historic nature of the building. So this project, in addition to the variance, they are asking for a revocable encroachment permit. There are several landscape improvements proposed in the front yard area and a portion of the Central Avenue area. And staff is supportive of those. There are several encroachment permits issued along the Grand Avenue frontage. So the revocable encroachment permit is a document recorded against the deed. So at any time the city wants to install improvements, we would take back those landscape improvements. And finally, there is a tree removal proposed. The tree is located within the public right-of-way towards the rear of the site along Central. It's a pine tree growing into a telephone pole, and staff has reviewed the tree in the field and is also supportive of tree removal. There is sufficient canopy coverage on the site, so instead of replacing 4 trees on site, staff is only requiring 2 trees to be replaced and incorporated in a revised landscape plan. So with all the conditions and findings, staff is recommending approval.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. Any questions for Danielle at all?
Well, the only thing I had for staff, and Steve is not here, but I see that they're requiring him to, excuse me, the project to keep the gravel turnaround in front.
Yes.
Is that considered a public turnaround?
It is not, but because the roadway is deteriorating there, it's very narrow in turnaround areas that exist on the public street. Steve was requiring that they keep that just as an additional area.
Okay.
He didn't want it taken out.
So you mentioned the existing garage doors having to be replaced.
The proposed garage doors. On the
I was just
existing home.
Maybe if the applicant's here, I'll ask him. But yeah, it looks like on the plan in front of the one of the bedrooms that on the left side of the plan, it shows the garage doors. I thought, yeah, it says garage doors to be rebuilt and reinstalled on a bedroom, and I thought that was a little odd.
I'm going to refer that to the applicant.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, is the applicant present?
Good evening. I'm Berna Brazzoni.
Hi.
Hi. And you had a question about the...
Well, on the plan, the new floor plan, on the bedroom number 3, looking at the front of the house from Grand Avenue on the far left, it says existing garage doors to be rebuilt and reinstalled.
Correct.
On a bedroom?
Well, we're going to have glass on the inside that are actually going to be, sliding. But when we went to the, I guess it was the historical review, she commented about the doors, and I said, why don't we just make them, re-establish them like a shutter, so that if we're there, we can open them like a shutter and then close them, and they would remain the integrity of what the garage doors look like now.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? I just have one out of curiosity.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm familiar with the house. It's the old Athenauer house. And the front of the house looking at Grand Avenue, those 3 doors that are there, typically into the living room.
Correct.
But I don't know if you're going to use that as your front door or not, but now it enters into the dining room. And I'm just curious why you would want your front door entering into the dining room. Just out of my own personal curiosity.
We have a huge family, and there's 17, and that's grandkids, daughters, son-in-laws. Our kitchen table that we're going to be putting there, that's the only area that we could. The bedroom on the right is going to be the kitchen. It flows. For our lifestyle, it flows.
Okay.
It'll
I was just
work.
curious.
It'll work.
Okay.
Come by when it's done. You'll see it flows.
It almost felt like you were giving up probably the grandest view on Grand Avenue for a dining room. You know, I mean that.
We're Italian. We spend half the time in the kitchen. I mean, come on.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? See no, and then we'll close the public portion and bring it back to the Planning Commission. Comments?
I support this project.
Linda?
Yeah, I support this project as well. I did want to make sure that it got noted. The house has been in the Architectural Survey of 1986 as well as the Depot Hill feasibility study, so it is a historic house. And the garage doors that they're keeping really are a historic element of the front of the house, so it's really good to see that you were able to keep those.
How could the garage doors be a historic feature of the front of the house when the garage is way down at the end of the driveway in the backyard?
No, the old garage.
The old garage.
The old garage.
No, but it's still down.
But it's still the face of the house.
I would never call that the face
Well,
of the
okay.
house.
Probably my terminology
I've
is
been
wrong
through
once
the-
again.
I've been through the house many times. I just wondered.
Any other comments?
I have none.
Nothing. Okay. I support the variance, and usually I'm not a real supporter of variances, but in this case the lot is such an odd shape, and you don't have a lot of options with this, so I can support the project too, and the encroachment permit.
I just wonder if we want to add something about the findings for that variance in the findings. I noticed that there weren't any, and sometimes I've seen them, and I think it's always good because if we get people asking about why they can't do something later on, we can refer back, gee, my neighbor got to do it, and we can refer back to the fact that this was an irregular shaped lot and that the variance was only to part of that driveway, and refer to those things so that it's on the record.
Good point. And you mentioned what the findings were, so maybe we should include those in the report.
Good point.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Move the application.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the application then with the variance and the encroachment permit. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item B, which is 305 Fanmar. This is also a coastal permit and design permit to remodel an existing multi-story single-family house, including a first and second story addition. Danielle?
Okay, once again, the technological challenge, so without a PowerPoint. This is a proposal for a 1- and 2-story addition. The interior remodel will, on the first floor, is a small living room addition of 71 square feet. The second floor is 443 square feet. It's a master bedroom, bathroom, and a closet area. The applicant's proposing to modify the roof line and increase it from approximately 17 feet to 27 feet. And the addition of, there's an existing one-car garage which will be maintained as a parking space, and 2 additional uncovered spaces in the driveway area. There's also a lower level basement area. There is an illegal kitchen, and that will be deed restricted to be removed. The bathroom will remain. It is a permitted bathroom. This also has non-conforming but legal setbacks. The proposal is the additions are not going to increase the non-conforming setbacks, and in fact on the second story step back more than what the district standards require. The main issue on this site is the increase of building height, and the question was raised to me earlier today, why is this not a variance? And the code does allow for the Planning Commission to grant permission to increase the building height to 27 feet. And so the maximum in the district is 25. They're asking for permission to grant up to 27 feet. And it is not considered a variance. However, under certain circumstances, the permission can be granted, and that is for a half-story or the use of historic design elements which meet the applicable district setbacks for that lot. So the staff feels that the proposed design uses traditional elements that create a better elevation and would support the height increase. And based on the findings in the staff report, we would recommend approval.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. Any questions for Danielle? Seeing none, then we'll open the public portion. Is the applicant present?
My name is Derek Van Alstyne. I'm the applicant, the designer, and stand at ready to answer your questions.
I'm not sure we have any questions for you, but I'll find out. Are there any questions, Mr. Van Alstyne?
I have one question. On the plans, the height, excuse me, is 27 feet?
Yes.
And on the sheet that we got tonight, it's 22 feet? Why the difference?
It's really interesting what happens, because when you view this property from Fanmar, when we went today and surveyed all the houses along Fanmar, they're all very similar, except for the fact that this parcel's the house on this parcel sits further back from Cherry than all the rest of the houses on the street. All of the rest of the houses going towards the east are 3 stories. They're all full 3 stories, the next 5 houses in a row. So when you push that mass downhill, those houses are all above 27 feet by the time you get as far down the hill as they are. So essentially what happens is they're all about the same from the street. It's how far they push out over the assumed grade line for their particular piece of property. Even the house next door, which is much lower, is 3 floors from Cherry.
Yeah, they're picking up the height by going down instead of up.
That's right. So basically what happens is even after we do the remodel on this, we're 11 feet, approximately 11 feet behind the other houses down the row. So we're under the 27 feet. They're probably over by some amount unknown, but definitely because they're further downhill, they're over that height. The important part here, I think, is that there's no real change in the appearance of mass from Fanmar because we all start out about the same height. And we're far enough back from Fanmar that the appearance of mass is not going to be any greater really than I think it is now. From Cherry, even after this remodel occurs, when you look from Cherry, the appearance of mass of this house will be less than all of its neighbors because we're set further back from Cherry even when we finish up. I hope that helps to explain.
Yeah. My concern when I first saw it was the potential problem with the view corridor there, but it's kind of sits over here, and the view's kind of off this way, so I didn't see that as a potential problem. Have you heard any comments on that from anyone?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Van Alstyne? Nope. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I want to commend you on your plans. I love your plans because they include everything, and they're so well laid out. They're just a beauty to behold.
Is there anyone present that would wish to speak? Yes, so you come up and sign the roster there, please. Identify yourself for us.
I already signed in. I guess the only reason I'm here is because I'm basically the one most affected by this roof elevation. I have a house across the street, and potentially, the way I'm envisioning, I'm going to lose half my ocean view. And I just bought my house about a year ago, and I feel like, you know, this is going to be a $100,000 minimal reduction in the value of my house. The way he described it, you know, from Cherry, it's not going to look taller, but from Fanmar, it's going to look a lot taller than those other houses that, you know, they're getting a lot of their mass and their elevation going down to Cherry, but this one, more of it is, you know, up on Fanmar. And I'm kind of wondering, I talked to one of my neighbors who said he was in here looking at the plans, and he was convinced that this whole addition was strictly going out the back. He said he looked at the plans, he didn't see any elevation gain. It was like we're looking at two different plans. I said, well, you should go on the, the website. His name is, I don't even know if I want to say his name, but he said he was in here and he looked at the plans, and he's wondering if there were different sets of plans, or maybe the other lady's comment about, one of them said 22 feet and the other one said 27 feet, that, somebody's confused about the elevation.
That was just an elevation that we received tonight at our desk, so I don't believe that was here before. But we can't speak to what your neighbor thought, so can't really respond to that one.
Well, I mean, I guess I could wind up fighting over 2 feet. I mean, I guess, 25 feet is within, there's nothing I can do about that, I suppose. But, it's pretty discouraging to sit there and spend a lot of money on an ocean view and have half of it taken away.
You say you live across the street, so do you live on the corner of
the little greenhouse across
Harris,
the street? No, I'm on Fanmar.
You live on Fanmar?
Right across the street. There's a one-story white house that they're doing a little remodel on, and I'm the next house over. It's a little greenhouse.
Would that be the last house on Fanmar before you go down the hill?
The second to the last house.
Second to the last house.
You should go up and, take a look at my deck. It's going to take, it's going to cut out half of my view. And I'm wondering, I guess in the city, they don't ever make you put up those, orange elevation things?
Typically not on a remodel, no.
On a new construction, they would.
Sometimes, yeah, if it's in a view corridor.
It's not quite true. In certain areas of the city, like the Riverview area, along the creek, they make it do it every time.
Yeah.
Mr. Hubbard had to do it the rest
Well, I'd like to see that.
But,
or, I mean, I guess there's no way to even ask for that.
yeah, it's your comments, and I'm trying to picture your house. You're between the house on the corner and the shingled house, the two-story?
Okay, I'm across the street from him. Okay, when you're standing in front of his house, looking across the street, there's a picture of my house on your website, one of the houses that you went and took a picture of.
It'd be this one, right here.
What page is that?
So the house would be right over here.
The apartments block most of the view.
Is it appropriate for me to ask her if this is her house?
Sure.
What? Sue Gray.
I just have a question.
Sure it's not a red area?
Yes.
So, ma'am, you have the two-story house? Here's a two-story house? Okay.
This is her house.
Which one was it?
It's this one here, but the view corridor is to the southwest because...
No, southeast. Southeast.
Well, if you sat on my deck, you'd see it was going to take up half of my view. I realize I don't have the house that's, right on the ocean. But I did spend a lot of extra money on the house because of the ocean view.
I drove up there today and took a look at the house, and I noticed the only thing, if they were obstructed, I didn't take the opportunity to go up on your deck, but would be from your angle. And then I was just looking from the street, and I came down from the Fanmar from the top and took a look at it. But looking at the project, and this is the part that's going to be deceiving because it's hard to tell by the drawings. And I could understand how the gentleman that came in may have thought it was only going out the back, because in reality the half story that's being added to it is primarily on the back of the way I look at the plan. So I could see how that would be, but it's a small portion of that. What I noticed would be a small, if it did diminish your view, is going to be small from what I could see from the street. So.
Well, if you were up on my deck, you'd see it was probably about half the view. And, ultimately I realized that, there's not really a whole lot I can do about it. I guess the other concern is, originally when that house was listed on the MLS, when it was sold last, it was listed as 1,900 square feet, 3-bedroom, 3-bath. And like you say, I guess they're getting rid of a basement and everything, but now it kind of appears that they're acting like it's, what, 1,400 square feet or something they're starting out with?
I'm not familiar with the MLS listing, so
well,
react
you
to
know.
that. So, could you identify yourself for us,
Oh,
please?
Sue Gray.
Okay, Sue, thank you very much. We'll take that under consideration.
Okay, the only other
Great.
thing could I mention is that, you know, on the website, it said something about construction can go till 9 o'clock at night. You know, and I was up on Depot Hill in a rental, and they had a remodel going next to me, and it only was able to go till 6 o'clock at night. I mean, 9 o'clock at night seems awfully, you know, late to be pounding nails and everything. Is that typical? I mean, I was told that it was 6 o'clock.
I think that's a typical condition, but we can certainly change that if we feel it's necessary.
All right, because I've been living next to a remodel for the last year, and they've been very nice, and they haven't worked past, you know, 5:30.
Those extended hours were created for home builders, the people who own the home doing the building. Maybe they're going to work during the day and building it on their off hours, and so a lot of times they want to come in and work on the weekends or at night when they're free.
Mm-hmm.
That was the reason for that change. I don't necessarily...
It doesn't seem like this would be that type of remodel.
Yeah, so what Commissioner Ruth is saying is that maybe we can work with the applicant to say that they wouldn't be doing anything past that, and we can past 6 o'clock at night since they don't have an owner-builder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gray. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
I think I just want to write my name down
You
here.
identify yourself for us,
Tom
too,
Needham. The height of the building, I think, is about 10 feet taller than it is existing right now. Is that the proposal?
Looks like about 9.5.
Yeah. And also, which really didn't come up, was it looks to me that if you take the overall width of the house on the upper story, you're picking up, I think, on the right about 3 to 4 feet, because they're kicking out that back portion towards the driveway side on the west driveway side, and then it seems like they're widening it also on the east side about maybe 6 feet. So the house is becoming a little more massive, maybe as much as 8 or so feet, you know, wider on the top level. And then I think what to me really makes it so much more kind of obtrusive is that the setback, I think an existing setback from a street, let's say it's on, is that terrace? I think it's on, is it on terrace? Is that, okay. I think it's, 15 or 20 feet or so? What is the typical setback on that street?
From the street,
Terrace is not a full-blown street.
Does it have setbacks?
it would be the standard R1 setback, so it's 15-foot front yard.
Yeah, so this house has maybe got 2 feet, or maybe there's no setback at all on this house. So you've got a house that isn't even set back off of terrace, and then you take it up 10 feet, and then you widen it by about 8 feet on the second floor. It really does, you know, it is really going to stand out.
So on the plan, it marks this house at Fanmar and what they call alley. It's not actually on terrace, it's on alley. That little street that runs in front of this house is not terrace.
It doesn't have a name.
Which is why they're calling it an alley, I think. But it's a pretty narrow little street. It's where all the garages from Cherry open.
I understand that.
Okay.
Jack Darrow's right next door.
Yeah, right next door, yeah.
Mr.
Needham, you have anything else?
Yeah, well, I guess another question, now that you mentioned how narrow it is there, that I think there should be some restriction with regard to parking in front of that house, because if you park a car in front of that house, first of all, it's an alley, let's say, because it really isn't a street. So if you put a car in front of that house, then you couldn't get a fire truck, or I would have trouble getting my pickup down that street with a sizable truck in front of it. So I'm thinking maybe there should be a restriction or something with regard to...
But that'd be typical of any house on that street, not just this particular one.
Except this one's being remodeled and the other ones aren't. So this is the one in question. I can't comment on what somebody else is going to do in the future on another house. But I'm thinking that I think you should look at that accessibility issue with regard to that narrow street and the parking issues. He's going to have 2 off-street, and he's going to have a garage parking, so he's covered that way. But I'm just thinking maybe we should have some kind of restriction, because there are, as maybe you already know when you were driving up there and looking around, there already are right within maybe 30 feet of that particular house, there are other parking restrictions that are in place with, can't park here, can't park there. I think maybe that would be another spot for, possibly can't park there also. I think it's worth looking at anyway.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Van Alstyne? Yeah.
If I could make one clarification. The difference in height between the existing house...
Excuse me. The difference in height between the existing house and the proposed roof line is 4 foot 3 inches. So what you're looking at is a...
4 foot 6 inches.
Excuse me, 4 foot 6 inches.
Yeah.
That would,
before you go on, because
yep.
everybody's confused me, and I'm going to ask you some questions. You handed
Sure.
out a Fanmar Street profile diagram
yes.
this evening.
Yeah.
And when, in response to one of the fellow commissioners' questions, Mick answered there was a 9-foot difference between the houses that exist.
Yeah, I was subtracting 27 from the 17.6.
Okay. And I'm seeing on here 17.6 versus 22 feet. If you measure it from what you've called a baseline here in front of the garages and the rest of it. So really, what is it? Because the plans show one thing and this shows something else.
well, and I didn't mean to confuse you by doing that diagram that way. What I was trying to show is that this house is basically no different than the other houses along the street. They're all approximately the same height. I couldn't measure them exactly, but they're approximately the same height on Fanmar, on the alley. It's where you get into the difference in grade that you get the changes. So if you take a baseline from the alley side, which is what that shows, we're 4.5 feet taller than the existing peak of the roof to the peak of the proposed roof. We sit further back from Cherry than all the rest of the houses. Therefore, where we hit the assumed grade, we're 27 feet, whereas most of the other houses, at least to the east, not to the west, but the 5 houses to the east, are all taller than this house from the assumed grade where they hit grade.
Okay. That makes sense to me, except that, Cherry is at one grade level for all the houses. Some people chose to, as I would call it, build down instead of build up. Mm-hmm. They get 3 stories because they've reduced their first level to almost the Cherry Street frontage or the wall on Cherry Street.
Right.
And I guess my difficulty tonight with regards to the complaint about height is that it appears that the height that you gain or the room that you gain in that half story or whatever it is over the existing roof height
yes.
could be somehow shifted more to the east on the house that you're remodeling, and you would do 2 things. You wouldn't have anything in her view corridor, and I'm not defending her comments, but there seems to be room here to work by it may not work interior-wise for them, and I understand that, but just looking at this street profile, it's not the only option. And then I'm not satisfied, and maybe you've read the code many times more than I have, but my understanding is if this were a complete tear down and you had this slope between Cherry Street and Terrace or Fanmar, whatever you want to call it, you would derive the 27-foot or the 25-foot height by taking a medium from high to low, and you would be measuring off that. You wouldn't be measuring off the highest point, and you wouldn't be measuring off the lowest point. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
That's called the assumed grade, which is
Right.
how the code describes it, and it is from basically it's from the point at which that the outward-facing wall hits at one end and the outward-facing wall hits the other one. It's the line described between the two. So if you were building new, that's how you would describe it. Yes, which is the same way we described it in the plans.
Okay. You've answered my question. So it's really, in this street profile, it's really turns out to be 4 feet 6 inches over the existing peak of the roof of the existing house.
Yes.
Okay. And I understand that it's set back more than the houses on both sides because I've been there, seen it, been in it. Okay.
Anything else, Ron?
No.
I have a question of the applicant.
Gail?
Staff indicated to me that this was not a half-story addition. Do you consider it a half-story addition?
No.
Thank you.
No, and nor are we using that portion of the code.
Right. I didn't think so, but I just want someone else mentioned that, and I just wanted to make sure that you agreed. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Seeing none, then we'll close the public portion, bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion. Who wants to lead off? Gail?
I'll lead off. I was on the council, I think, or the Planning Commission when we changed the code and we inserted this code that is named that talks about the Planning Commission can grant permission on half-story designs and buildings that use historic design elements. And what we were trying to do was to give people who are remodeling houses that are on either our survey or are considered historic some leeway to get a little bit more room in some of these smaller homes, but as long as they really keep the lines of the house, in the integrity of the house, the existing house. And I'm afraid we didn't do a great job of getting this written. I think it's very ambiguous, and I can see why the applicant would like to use it, and I believe the applicant may have used it up on Central a couple of years ago, and I think it was appropriate for that house. That was a historic house. This one, I just fail to see how this particular part of our code applies to this particular house. I don't think the word historic applies to this house or historic lines. You know, I'm having a hard time applying that and being able to figure out how we could write the findings, because I think we need to write it. If we do approve this, we need to write a finding that supports this decision. I'm not so sure how we could really do that and then allow. So what is the applicant saying is historic about this? You know, then anybody can say their house is historic because it was built in a certain era and they're keeping those lines. That's really not the intent of this ordinance, I believe. Other than that, I think this is a great design. It would be a great addition to the neighborhood.
Thank you, Gail. Linda?
I'm just afraid of the mass of the house. I went up and I looked today, and I don't really understand the 22 feet, but when I was up looking at the house, if you go up 10 feet from where that roof line is now, it seems to me it towers. And so what I think you're saying is that 10 feet is not at the front where the roof line is today, but it's way back, and so some of that 10 feet is down. Looking at it from Cherry looking up, the mass doesn't overwhelm the mass of the neighboring house except for the one to the west, which is significantly shorter. So I'm listening to everybody's comments. I'm concerned about the mass.
Okay. TJ?
I also went up and took a look at it. I talked to the neighbors to the west, and they didn't have the concerns. They want to cut down the tree in between the two houses, but they didn't have concerns about so much the height, and they were looking forward to the house being remodeled. But I did have a concern of the views from the other houses, and without going up on other people's property, try to take a perspective of that. But the mass itself, for some reason, I think the drawings lends itself to enhance that area, that house. I think it's going to be a great improvement. And I've got this my perception is this drawing that we have sitting from us tonight really kind of gives a clean view of showing how that the new height is actually recessed back some, so you don't really, it's not like you're looking at this huge mass right off of Cherry. So, I'm sorry, off of the Fanmark corner there. So for me, I thought it was going to be a great addition, and I thought it was going to enhance that area, and I didn't have the mass concern. Looking from Cherry, there's a whole variety of different types of homes there, and I think it's just going to clean up the area itself, and if anything, maybe enhance some of the values of having something that's a nicer home there.
Thank you, TJ. Ron?
Well, I have mixed emotions. I always feel that as you build back from the coast, the last street back, it doesn't guarantee you a view. And then I also see what historically we've done out there. My concern is it sounds like this could go either way as a vote, but I'd like to see under the conditions, I'd like the condition with regards to hours of construction be changed from 7:30 a.m. to 6 on weekdays. I think it's crazy to go at 9 o'clock at night. I know they're trying to take advantage of the summer and daylight saving time, but people come home from work and they'd like some quiet time, and I think that would be the only way I'd approve that with that condition changed.
If I could add just real quick to that, and I was going to make a note of that, I did talk to the neighbors to the west who, the gentleman suffering from cancer, and that was their biggest concern is the construction noise, and I was just going to ask the contractor to be considerate of the neighbors when they do that. And I think the hours would be appropriate to change to less than 9 o'clock.
Anything else, Ron?
Nothing else at this time.
Yeah, I've heard all the concerns. I'm kind of leaning towards that this property owner deserves to have the same rights and enjoyment of their property as the other people along that street. So that's kind of where I'm at on this right now. Someone care to add more or attempt a motion?
I just wonder if we enlarge the houses of Capitola incrementally with that logic, and we don't really know the logic of the ones prior to. But I just still have concerns about the logic that we would be applying to this, giving our permission. They're asking us to give permission based on historic design elements. And I really want to know how other commissioners feel. We need to apply. We can't just say, because I agree. I think this is a much better design. I think it looks good. But we need to follow our ordinances. And if this is the ordinance they're hanging their hat on, then how do we make findings for that? So that's one point I really want to ask commissioners, not just it's your opinion or whatever. We've got to follow the laws here, and how does this apply to that law? I'm willing to be talked into that. I'm also curious about the netting. This is part of our view shed, and it's not uncommon that we ask people to net, and this being visible from the village or from down at anywhere else in Capitola, it might be not. I think we have a good precedent for asking this to be netted. I also, thirdly, have some concerns about the different elevation quotes here at the meeting without having our staff have a chance to really look at what this means, because this is something that the applicants brought in. So in the least, I would like to see this continued to make sure that our staff has a chance to take a look at this new data that it says it's lowering the elevation, and make sure that our staff agrees with that. But I'd also like to see it possibly netted, maybe continued until the next meeting and netted, and see what we say. But I'd really like the other commissioners to talk about how this applies to this particular ordinance.
Yeah, I think you make a strong argument for the historic design elements. I'm not sure what those are either.
It's a terrible ordinance, I'm sorry to say. It just didn't get written as we had planned, and it's very nebulous. Maybe the applicant could talk to us about how they feel this applies to an historic element. Historically, this is the shape of the existing house.
You're opening a Pandora's box. You know that, don't you? I think that the important thing here is that, and I can't speak to what happened when this ordinance was created, but the way that I view it is that there's some leeway in the code so that you encourage good architectural practice. And I think that when you take a house like this that needs a lot of help, and you use traditional features, that goes a long way to keeping Capitola feeling like Capitola. So, and there are a lot of different styles in Capitola. We have Victorians, we have arts and crafts, we have just about everything. Mediterranean, all kinds of styles. So that kind of opens it up to say, okay, if you use traditional elements in an existing house, and if you enhance those elements, then we're going to give you some leeway because that's encouraging good architectural design. And that's the way that I view this, is that we've taken this house, what is has slipped into a decaying state, taken the original features of the house, amplified them, and reuse those elements in the new portion of the house. And I think that that's the important piece here, is that it is congruous. It will work together. It will hang together nicely, and that's what the city ought to encourage. I think I'll leave it at that. I could go on and on, but I think the idea of promoting good architectural design is an important one, and that's the way that piece of the code section reads to me.
Thank you.
So essentially, let me ask you a question to expound on that a little bit. Historical design elements have nothing to do with any historical features that currently exist in that building, right? Historical design features are features that have been used historically throughout the building trades. Would that be correct?
I think you can look at it both ways.
Okay.
I definitely think you can look at it both ways. And we've used this ordinance a number of times since it was written.
But what designs aren't part of historical building designs? I mean, pretty much everything that's being designed has been designed historically somewhere.
That's a
Toadstool house on the way to San Francisco?
Well,
that's a good question, and if we weren't building new houses today, we wouldn't have history in the future.
Right.
But I also looked at it as the history of this particular house. The architecture of the house isn't changing dramatically. It's keeping with what that house has looked like since it's been built. So it's not a complete and total modernization. It's keeping with those historic elements.
That was exactly my point.
Can I ask a question of staff? I didn't pick this up in the staff report, but during all your conversation, I read it. I noticed that our person in charge of planning over here, the two planners here tonight are made a comment in the background, and I'm curious because I had never heard these words used before. And the basement area is considered unconditioned space. What is an unconditioned space?
It's a building code requirement or term. So
I've never seen any definition in the building code of an unconditioned space. Is there one?
In the building code, I believe so, yes.
But it's not part of our zoning ordinance?
No, it's not.
Okay. Then you also go on in your fifth bullet to say that there have been numerous corrections to the drawings, adequate room labels, removal of an illegal unit, and a landscape plan that all seem to be in limbo. Have all those things been satisfied?
They have. The plans were revised and addressed all the architectural and site review committee comments.
Okay. I'm going to say something because there's no motion, but I'm leaning tonight to send this back to the drawing board a little bit for clarification. And I think it'll probably go through anyway, but I see the site as being able to accommodate the additional height by placing the additional height at another part of the building that would be behind the apartments and never block the view shed, if you want to call the young lady's view a view shed. Is really not. Anybody could build to 27 feet in front of her. And
when I was talking about view shed, I meant from the village.
Yeah,
I
understand.
That's not a view shed.
I think netting would be a good idea to really see what the mass looks like. The person that testified has invited us up to look, and that we could get a very good look at what she loses or doesn't lose. We could see the mass of the building. This one bothers me because there's a lot of ways that they could get more space on this site without going up.
Right. You know, I really want to go back to this ordinance and make sure that the commission knows that if they do approve this based on this particular ordinance, there isn't any reason why somebody can't come back and say, I am keeping with the design of this house remodel and I want 27 feet as well. And that's basic. That can be anybody who sticks with the design of their existing house, is what I'm hearing we're going to hang our hats on.
I actually, Gail, that's how I read this, is that keeping with the current architect, and I mean, what is historic anymore, but if they were to tear down the house, to me it would fall under maybe a little different purview than that. So I read it as keeping with the character of the house and the historical perspective of the house and the architecture is how I looked at it.
So basically, you feel like all remodels in Capitola, if they do that, can go up to 27 feet.
I think that everyone in Capitola has the option of coming before this panel and asking for it, absolutely.
Well, that, yes, absolutely goes without saying. But my question remains, and that is, are we going to say, yes, we're going to give it to them if they follow the current design of the house?
Well, reading this and looking at this, and without regard to the poor lady whose view may be blocked some, I think it would be something I would move forward and support. And I think the thing with the height of the roof lines, having just gone through this recently, not too long ago myself, is something that maybe the city ought to take a look at, because
I know we will.
Because I think it takes away from the ability to really add character. And if you look through the village, anywhere, the view shed, however you want to call it, the ones that really have character, the ones that have nice roof designs and not stuck with a 27-foot flat roof trying to add that living space. So for me, it's not so much about adding so much living space, but I think that the height of the home should add character to it and not take away from that. And looking at this project, it certainly looks like to me it's going to add character without hampering too much for you, again, because the bulk of this addition is recessed back towards the hillside. And even looking at it from the Cherry side, when you look at the neighborhood, it's not inconsistent with what's already there.
I respect what you're saying. I don't feel like you answered my question, but I do respect.
No, I think, well, to me, I think that everyone's got an opportunity to bring it to us to take a look at and to see if it meets that. Now, I wasn't there to write the ordinance, so I can't tell you exactly what the intent of historic is. And I'm taking the applicant's word that it's not the, they're not going for the half story. So. But looking what's consistent with the historical part of that home and character, I think it meets that. And I don't know that it takes away from the neighborhood. I think it enhances it.
I just want to add a couple of cents, because one of the things that I would be concerned about with the 27 feet and just granting it based on the fact that they're not changing the style of the home is that, no, not every application should automatically get a 27-foot allowance just because they're not changing it. But in this case, it's not really 27 feet at the street level. And the grade of this particular piece of property plays into that in my mind a little bit. But I share the concern. I would really support a continuance to see the some orange netting, just because when I was up there looking, I still don't understand really from the Fanmar how much taller than those other houses is it going to be. Even on this, the shortest street, we've got 1 foot on the right and 6 feet on the right, on the left. However, right, left, right. But it's going to be taller than its neighbors. And how much more massive is that additional height going to introduce? I'd really like to see some better idea of that.
Would someone like to attempt a motion?
I'll move a continuation and ask the applicant if they would be willing to net the house.
And if they say no, do you just want to make that a requirement instead?
The only part you want netted is the new addition, the
Correct.
height addition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that, I'm going to support. I'm going to second the motion because I support the idea of really looking at this. And my only comment would be both to the architect and the applicant is I might suggest that they look for that height somewhere else on the site as opposed to being on the west side of the house.
Okay. Just a clarification on the motion then. Are we asking the applicant to net it, or are we saying that it has to be netted?
Well, I guess what I'd like to do is ask the applicant before I make the motion if they're comfortable with that, and then I'll go ahead and make the motion that we are requesting it to be netted. Well, maybe we should continue it with the request to have it netted, and then if you decide not to net it based on cost or whatever, you can come back to us, come back to staff, and we can review it at that time. But maybe we should just continue it and ask for netting, and then you can...
There also is a way to do computer-generated drawings that would show the streetscape more to scale.
I personally don't feel like that's in place of netting.
I don't either, but...
Well, I guess my question would be on the motion then, what are we continuing for? If we're not going to ask them to net it or they're not going to net it, then what is it continuing for?
I think the applicant was asking, he's not sure about the cost, and so maybe we're giving them time to...
The answer to your question for me is different than hers. You don't get my vote yay unless you do it. You may get my vote yay if you do it.
Okay. Okay. So we have a motion then and a second. The motion is to request that the applicant net the second-story addition and continue the item indefinitely until that is done?
Yeah, for however long they need to do that.
Okay. Call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Or one opposition. Mr. Van Alstyne?
Can we ask that it be scheduled as soon as possible?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd also...
You get the netting up and we get it back on the agenda, okay?
And I'd also like, when this does come back to us, to have staff take a look at, really, staff, we need you to tell us what the height increases are here, not the applicant. We want to hear it from staff. We want it in writing so that it goes into the record from our staff. And also maybe address, and maybe the applicant can address, the front parking restrictions, if we can do that. If we can't, then that's fine too, but maybe we should just address it.
Okay. That concludes that item. Thank you, Ms. Van Alstyne. So that concludes the business items on our agenda. Are there any reports from any of the staff, director's report?
I'm not your director, but the new director will be arriving on April 22nd, and the senior planner position is being recruited currently and closes on April 29th.
Okay, great.
I have a comment. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll put you under communications there.
Yeah, Commission Communications. You know, I attended the last meeting where they did the GPAC land use element, and it became apparent to me that this is not meant to be derogatory, but it is a little bit, that we could have got somebody out of UCSC or someplace that was a little bit more familiar with the community than the consultants we got. They didn't even know. They renamed half the city for us, believe it or not. Just so you know, the jukebox no longer exists. It's now called Capitola West. And the North 40s are now also Capitola West. City Hall here is on Capitola Road. Didn't know the difference between Capitola Road and Capitola Avenue. But what really concerns me is I think early on we were, each Planning Commission night, we were asked about things that should be looked at in the general plan. And while mine don't go directly to the general plan, they're kind of hit up tonight by a couple of things. And I was never aware that half stories made the difference between 25 feet and 27 feet. You know, my comment is that if you have a zoning ordinance that's very concise and says that in the village, for example, that there's 25 feet, anything above 25 feet needs a variance, that's a whole different procedure than somebody at a staff level deciding, well, it's only a half story, so therefore it can go to 27 feet. But the real issue with me is that there are houses being built at the corner that I sat here and approved on this body that are being built on the corner of 48th, I think it is. It's either 48th or 47th. It's 48th. 48th and Capitola Road. And for a number of years, we were trying to get second floor setbacks. And I'll be darned if those two buildings on one side are just like a shed. I mean, they are god-awful ugly. They're great looking from the front, but they have no, it's like one side is a blank wall that's straight up and down with no setback, and they try to get the setback over the front door or over the garage or something like that. And I think we really got to look at making sure that when we do the general plan and the ordinance that incorporates those recommendations, that we look at second floor setbacks again, and I want that as one commissioner transferred to whoever the new planning director is, because I think that's something that the community has worked for years. It not only makes things look better, they don't all look like cookie cutter boxes, and the other thing was the reason for the setback was to preserve some of these view corridors between houses and the rest of it. Those are my comments.
I've heard tons of negative comments about those
I
two
just
new
thought
houses, but particularly the one that's right on the street.
On the corner,
there, yeah.
the one on the corner, because what everybody sees going down Capitola Road is the worst elevation.
But weren't they all approved by the Planning Commission?
Yes.
Okay.
A long time ago.
Oh,
yeah. Long time.
What, 3 years ago at least?
Yeah, it's been.
But we don't really have an ordinance to hang our hat on with that.
Well, yes, we do. We have a second floor setback. You can even see it on.
But they didn't get any variances, so they
That's
met
because
that.
we haven't been tough enough. Yes, I agree with you.
They met that.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about the general plan as well. I hope that a study session where all that's scheduled for us is a review of the zoning ordinance changes when that comes up, so that the public gets a chance to address us on it, and we have at least one study session where there's nothing else on the agenda, and we get a chance to really go through them with a fine-tooth comb before they're put to either the General Plan Commission or committee or the council, because it's really important, and it's going to be huge. There are going to be a lot of changes, I know.
Well, the ordinance tonight was a prime example.
Right.
When you talk about
It's
historical
just like every
design
one of
elements,
them.
what does that mean? And that's the problem right there.
There's so many. The tree ordinance, there's so many different ordinances that weren't written well and that are going to get changed.
The mayor is asking for a joint meeting on the GPAC when the final recommendation comes in with regards to the general plan. The talk has not gone on at these meetings yet with regards to the zoning regulations, because that will follow after there is an approved general plan.
Well, you know, now I am the representative for the Planning Commission on and I am unable, because of a yearly commitment, to make this next June meeting. And I think we should appoint an alternate, because I think that's a very important meeting, and we need a voice on that. And you know, I don't know how anybody else feels about, and whether we're even able to appoint an alternate to that, but I'd like to. I think we need to be represented.
Well, if we have
just the next one, you know.
No, I think anyone can go.
Well, but can they officially
you want to go there in
represent?
an official capacity?
No, I don't know. Does it make any difference? I don't know.
See, I go and I don't. When I introduce myself with the rostrum, I do not mention that I'm a planning commissioner.
Right, because you're not, and you're not a member of that. So
no,
this person would have voting privileges.
I understand where you're coming from.
Right. So
you know, the participation in the GPAC meetings has dropped off to nothing. They made a great grand statement that you know, we've had 16 meetings and the first one was attended by 100 and some odd people, but they didn't mention how many attended the next 15 meetings, because it just kept. I was the audience of one at one of them.
Yeah.
When they were discussing Coronado and Park Avenue and the trail between Kennedy and not Kennedy, Monterey and Coronado, you know, the one behind the duplexes.
Who's the GPAC chair now? Is it still Ed?
It's Ed.
Well, I'd be happy to go and sit in the chair for you if Ed is okay with that.
Well, maybe Danielle, could you find out if we could appoint Linda as an alternate to Gail so she would have voting rights?
That's great.
I'll find out.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you for offering that.
Great.
Okay, anything else? Nope. Meeting adjourned.
So I have a question.
Gladiators are the sporting heroes of their time and free to roam the streets. Ardent fans scrawl love notes on city walls.
Wait, here! Keledos, the fashion, is all the girls' heart throb.
Life will soon change forever. But for now, they concentrate on doing what they do best, making money.
Come on! Hurry it up!
This business is run on human urine. It's so valuable that the emperor has even put a tax on it. It's a fullery. Clothes are brought here to be